Okay. Well, good morning. It's so great to see everyone. On behalf of the WVU Center for Community Engagement, we are so glad you are joining us for this Academic Community Engagement, or ACE, event. The ACE Development Series aims to increase the breadth and quality of academic community engagement at WVU. Our intentions are that through presentation and discussion, attendees of the ACE series will learn how to get started or enhance what they're already doing and connect to a network of peers and resources. Today's presentation is called Place-Based Approaches for Thriving Communities. My name is Melissa Calabrese, and I'm the Academic Community Engagement Coordinator with the Center for Community Engagement. To make our time together more intimate, you're invited to say hello in the chat right now and share what department or organization you're representing today. And while you're doing that, just want to let you know we're here together for the next 50 minutes to share some best practices and ask questions about place-based approaches, including how we might be able to nurture holistic ways of thinking, learning, and collaborating. I encourage you to engage in whatever way feels right to you, including turning on your camera and asking questions, using the chat, and or making use of the Zoom emojis. Folks know I love my heart emoji. Do we have any volunteers who would be willing to try their emoji now just for fun? This conversation will be recorded and shared with registered participants and will be added to our ACE library on our website. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's ACE panel on place-based approaches for thriving communities, Whitney Glatfelty. In her roles as the Community Partner Coordinator and Assistant Director of the Center for Community Engagement here at WVU, Whitney is more than a facilitator. She's a catalyst for impactful change. Her dedication to supporting organizations ranging from nonprofits and small businesses, plus faculty and students, underscores her commitment to fostering vibrant and resilient communities. With a background in education and nonprofit leadership, Whitney brings a unique perspective to the table. Her passion for bringing together teaching and community engagement reflects in her deep understanding of the interconnectedness between education, community development, and collective prosperity. She understands that thriving communities are built on a foundation of meaningful connections, shared resources, and collaborative efforts. Her role as a connector, bridging the gap between community leaders, organizations, and institutions like WVU, exemplifies her commitment to nurturing these vital relationships. With a master's in business administration focusing on management and motivation, coupled with a bachelor's in elementary education specializing in mathematics, Whitney possesses a unique blend of skills that enables her to navigate the complexities of community development with insight and empathy. Please join me in welcoming Whitney Glatfelty as our moderator today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Melissa, and thanks so much to everyone for being here. We are super excited about today's session and the opportunity to really have so many champions of community engagement in the room together and coming together this morning. So I am super thrilled for the opportunity to introduce you to two of those champions this morning and to have you hear from some of their expertise and their experiences. But we do, as Melissa said, encourage you to continue to use the chat throughout today's session. If you have questions or other insights or takeaways, we would love to see those in the chat throughout. So without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Jamilah Jamie Ducar. Jamie is the Assistant Vice Chancellor of the Engaged Campus at the University of Pittsburgh and one of our outstanding panelists for today's discussion on place-based approaches for thriving communities. With over a decade of experience in human services and nonprofit consulting before transitioning to higher ed, Dr. Ducar brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to the table. In her role as Assistant Vice Chancellor of the Engaged Campus, she has played a pivotal role in shaping Pitt as an engaged campus and anchor institution, fostering collaboration and transformative change within local communities. Dr. Ducar's leadership extends far beyond the confines of her own institution, as evidenced by her national contributions. She currently chairs the Place-Based Justice Network and serves as an advisor for Weave, the social fabric project of the Aspen Institute, highlighting her dedication to advancing community engagement practices on a broader scale. Her commitment to ethics, justice, and excellence in community engagement has certainly not gone unnoticed. Dr. Ducar's remarkable contributions have earned her recognition as this year's recipient of the Nadine Cruz Community Engagement Award, a testament to her exemplary leadership and dedication to weaving the fabric of humanity through institutionalized community engagement. Dr. Ducar, thank you for joining us today. And I do want to recognize, I know Dr. Ducar will have lots to say, but I do want to recognize her as well for coming in, really flying in at the last second to make it back to her home for today's session. Dr. Ducar has again played a national role in community engagement, and just recently has been gone for 5 days, not only accepting her amazing award, but also really highlighting community engagement to so many others around our nation. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
All right, and please join me also in welcoming Karen Herring. Karen is the founder and executive director of Libera to our panel. Karen's journey is deeply rooted in her unwavering passion for listening and aiding others. With a background in education and extensive experience of working with women and teens, Karen has dedicated over 4 decades to empowering individuals in both group and mentoring settings. Karen's commitment to helping women and teens find their voice and freedom is at the heart of Libera's mission. Through the development of the Libera model alongside fellow West Virginia women, she has pioneered a transformative approach that fosters self-discovery and empowerment. Despite her Ohio origins, Karen's love for West Virginia runs deep, having called it home for over 35 years. Her dedication to the state's residents is reflected in Libera's vision, which aims to uplift and empower women and teens across West Virginia, helping them to feel seen, loved, and capable of flourishing. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Karen Herring as she shares her insights and experiences with us today. Thanks for being here, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we will jump right in because we have lots of questions for these 2 amazing panelists who are here today, and I know that they have tons of insight to share. So I will sort of start with the first question, and then we will kind of roll things out from there. Dr. Ducar, I'm wondering if you might be willing to kind of start us off. And we're going to start with this question of really defining a place-based approach in the context of community development. So really, what does that mean? And why is it so important for creating thriving communities?
Thanks so much, Whitney. I'm so excited to be with you all today. And please excuse my voice. It's just a holdover from the travel. So for me, place-based engagement is really interesting. First off, I had the opportunity to learn from the beautiful work of Kent Koth and Erica Yamamura, who literally wrote the book on this topic. And so place-based engagement is really thinking about how it is you can isolate the intention of your resources and your partnerships to serve either a particular geography or a community of impact, a community of circumstance, but it's really taking a deep dive rather than thinking about how it is you can be a broad support, thinking about how it is that you can be ever present in the civic life of a community and use that to serve as a complementary asset. So for me, that's everything. It means that my children are using the playgrounds of the communities that I work in and partner with. It means that they see me as a full person wherever possible and not just within my role. And hopefully it means that eventually you're the type of partner that's seen as a resource for any type of opportunity, personal or professional. If you've been able to think about the groups of people that you're engaging with and not just necessarily a topic or a place.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Karen, I want to turn it to you. I know that Libera certainly employs this approach in a really meaningful way, both for throughout the geography of the folks that you serve, but then also as you have sort of gone through the process of determining where Libera's mission was going to lead you to and who, in fact, you were going to serve. And so I'd like to see what you may have to add to that conversation and the importance of that place-based approach.
Yes, thank you. So our vision is to build a brighter future for West Virginia youth and young women so they are free to achieve their dreams. So with that as the background, we work with youth and young women. And I think for us, place-based is working across community systems to become more collaborative and also to find and fill gaps. And I think that's really important because I think that often we can tend to work in silos and instead of collaboration. And so for an example, we work with community members who are trained to be our mentors. We work with youth and young women as clients. We work in juvenile justice systems and youth reporting centers. We work doing our groups and mentoring in public school systems. We work in foster congregate care homes. We work with other nonprofits, and we work with government agencies. And so being able to work across the system really gives us a full picture. And I think that as we're working together across the system, we can become more place-based, community-based, and really, especially I think I see gaps, we see gaps, the other nonprofits and government agencies we work with see gaps, and often people do not know about the resources available. And so it's a way working across the community systems and collaborating to better understand what is there and what does everyone do, what is everyone's role, working together instead of in separate silos.
Absolutely. I love that. And I want to kind of piggyback off of that, Karen. I know you kind of mentioned broadly some of the partnerships, extensive partnerships that you have and that Libera has formed, but would you mind sort of sharing a specific example of a really successful, long-lasting partnership that Libera has, where you really have been able to kind of see that mutual benefit between Libera and the other entity, and that you have really been able to make significant impact?
Sure. Let's talk about justice impacted youth. So where it started is I'm part of the state advisory group for the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee, which is a state level committee. They were speaking this was 5 or 6 years ago, saying there was a need for girls in incarceration to have better emotional and mental health support. We toured a facility. I met the director there, Linda Scott, at Ronald Mulholland Juvenile Detention Center in Wheeling. We met with their staff, started doing Libera groups there. So it was involving Libera and different community members who are trained as mentors, helping to serve the youth there. And then we've also done research, actually 2 different research projects with WVU. And Dr. Clayton at the School of Public Health has done research on our model and the feedback we've gotten from the girls. So we do surveys with them. We get qualitative feedback from them. Dr. DeCasaretti at WVU in the School of Sociology is doing interviews right now. So we are learning what the needs are, what the emotional state of these youth is. And this is going to inform practices into the future, both for Libera and other nonprofits and juvenile detention and the government. And a side note on that is some of the other facilities heard about what we're doing. So now we're spreading to other juvenile detention facilities, but several of the judges, local judges as well, heard about this. And now we are actually involved in the youth reporting centers. And we've actually become part of the process for the girls going through the youth reporting center situation. So we're part of that process now. So we're kind of working, with the government, we're working with the SAG committee, we're working with other nonprofits, we're working with community members. And some of the feedback we got from the girls has even led to revising our workbook and some of the things we do with success planning. So it's a circular thing, creating a better situation for everyone involved in the community, that community in particular.
Absolutely. I love just hearing about the way that it transitioned from, one partnership, one relationship, but it has grown so much since then and really allowed you guys to impact the entire state. And so I know, Jamie, I know you have lots of experiences with very similar sort of projects and also many different projects that have really taken on a life of their own, so to speak. And you've been able to see that really long lasting partnership and the impact that that can make. Would you mind sharing an example of maybe an opportunity that you've been involved with before?
Yeah, so one thing that I'll share is while the University of Pittsburgh has a really long history of deep partnership in our communities, our team is still relatively new. So our first place-based center in Homewood just opened in 2018. But for us, it was really interesting that we pulled in the approaches and borrowed from other systems to be able to think about how it is you can show up authentically in a place and with a place. And so one of the things that I want to highlight is, we think about how it is we can reorient the routines of the academy and the economic demand of the academy and really concentrate those and align them with our neighborhood commitments. And one of the things we were able to do is with some grant funding, bring on a workforce development specialist that took on a place-based lens, which is really unique amongst higher ed. So not only do we have a community engagement team that's thinking about four neighborhoods very deeply, but now we have a workforce development counselor who last year was able to meet with, to counsel, and hire 191 folks from just four neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh into full-time benefits playing roles at our institution. And once you start to think about what it means to concentrate your efforts in a particular geography, you can start to shift the narrative and the access to opportunity for a particular zip code, which can be really, really powerful. And so these are roles that allow for folks, if they don't have a bachelor's degree, to get one with the support of the University of Pittsburgh and a subsidy for the young people in their family to be able to attend the University of Pittsburgh tuition free. And that really changes things and it becomes a compounding opportunity. And that's really exciting. So we've been wildly successful with that. And we're hoping that we'll be able to get another role, right? Because it's difficult to do this at scale if it's just one person's job. But we're very encouraged by what we've seen so far.
I love that. And so important. I especially really sort of, was drawn to the piece that you were talking about with workforce development specifically and providing those opportunities. And immediately also was just thinking about the connections between our two panelists today, kind of coming, of course, we have a community partner organization, and then we have an institution of higher education, but we're all thinking and working towards the same things. And as soon as you mentioned that, I immediately wanted to give Karen the opportunity too. Karen, I know that Libera has really also seen that workforce development piece be so important. And you've, in the last couple of years, really started to develop a pipeline to be able to provide those employment opportunities for some of the women and teens that you work with. And so I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share a little bit about what that looks like and why you felt that that was important in sort of the transition of Libera to extend that opportunity.
Yes, I think over the growth of Libera, we've decided that it's helpful to focus on the more at-risk population because people are falling through the cracks. And so that was one of our motivations. And I think we saw that especially justice impacted youth, foster youth, those communities of at-risk youth were coming out of incarceration or foster care, transitioning out and not having many options. So that was our motivation. And as we've done this, one of the things that I think has been really helpful is we've done some advisory groups and focus groups. So we're having an advisory group meet quarterly that brings in different stakeholders. So we have nonprofits, a church is involved. We have the West Virginia Foster Ombudsman, the Coalition to End Homelessness, Libera, Children's Home Society, and some other nonprofits. So it's been really helpful to have those agencies and places collaborate together about the community and what are the needs in the community, what are the needs specifically of some of these youth that are transitioning, and how can we best support them. So I've been really excited about the collaboration that we've had there, and also having some focus groups with we have community mentors, so it's very grassroots. We're training community members to work in their communities so they can see the needs and help meet the needs. But we've done some focus groups lately with the community mentors, and that's been very helpful too, because sometimes they see things that we even as staff do not see as needs, or how can we improve services? And these can be shared then with other community partners, and community partners can share things with us. That's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It takes a village, right? To
Yes.
do this kind of work.
Yes.
Jamie, I want to circle back to a comment that you made as well. And the word that just initially stuck out to me was authenticity, and going into communities in an authentic way, and the importance of that to being able to have success in working with them. And so we know that, going in with an authentic attitude and building that trust in that relationship is so important. But how do you approach that? What are some tactics that maybe you employ to be able to ensure that when you're working with diverse stakeholders, that you get that buy-in and you have that community voice, and that it does truly feel like a community-based effort?
Yeah, thank you. That's such an amazing question. And I would answer that by first saying that I imagine that I would do many of the things that Karen is doing. That is the world that I like to say I was professionally raised in, right? I'm a human services practitioner, a child welfare practitioner, juvenile justice systems, and behavioral health systems. And so I've navigated all of these non-negotiables and seeing how it is those impact families, and being able to serve as a navigator through those storms really has centered and grounded my approach in higher ed. So folks know when I show up in a room, in a space, it's there to be a listener. And it's also there as somebody that's grounded in not necessarily like theoretical work or um, from pulling from the world of service learning. I come from a frontline lens where first you have to establish that mutual dignity and respect is at the heart of whatever relationship is going to be there. And that second, I want to be able to build not only my partner's capacity, but my capacity to make some level of advancement. There's no win too small for me to cheer on and to feel proud of. And so I think if you message to folks that you're willing to stick it out, that you're in here for the long haul, and that you're willing to iterate and be adaptive to what's happening in folks' lives and where their priorities are, that they're willing to walk alongside you and figure this out. And that really is the work every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Karen, I know you've already mentioned many different ways. I mean, you talked about focus groups and other ways that you get that community input and voice, but I do want to give you the opportunity. Are there any other ways that you would sort of add that you also work to build that trust and step into those situations in authentic ways that really have allowed Libera to be successful?
Yeah, thank you. I think it comes back to values. I've actually been involved with some organizations where I wasn't really clear on the values, but Libera, we've made it purposeful to put our values front and center for not only our staff, but all of the community mentors we train, which happen to be a lot of students too. We work a lot with students, but the three values are listen, learn, and love. And Jamie mentioned listening. I think that's so crucial. So we say we listen with empathy and without judgment to everyone's story. We learn about someone and we learn from them. And I think that's key of people, organizations, people, whomever we're talking to, wherever we are, understand that we're learning about them, but we're also willing to learn from them. It evens the playing field. And then to love people as they are, where they are. So keeping those values front and center, I think helps a lot. Also, vulnerability is a big part of what we emphasize in our Libera model in groups. And so if you're vulnerable, I think people will tend to trust you because you're expressing that vulnerability and saying, hey, we aren't perfect. We're here to learn. So.
Absolutely. That's huge, right? And I think that what I keep hearing, right, is that it does all come back to those relationships. Relationship has to come first in order for us to make progress, whether it's a project or an idea that we have or a community need that we're trying to address. All of those things are absolutely wonderful and deserve our attention. But if we don't take the time to really lay that foundation, oftentimes we get into situations where maybe it's hard to move forward with a solution that may be well-intentioned or a great idea, but if we don't have that relationship with the people that it's actually impacting, we're not going to get that buy-in, and therefore it's just not going to be, as successful, certainly. So I want to kind of shift a little bit away from talking about the transparency and the authenticity to talking a little bit more about sustainability. It's another thing that we oftentimes encounter as, I won't say a struggle, but something that is a challenge when it comes to place-based engagement and thinking about how we can make sure that we're having sustainable impact in communities. And that sometimes I think, particularly whenever we're talking about relationships between communities and institutions of higher education, we're really trying to expand beyond just a project that spans one semester or even an academic year, for example, to something that is a true relationship between a community and the institution and others involved, certainly. So Jamie, I'll kind of maybe have you start us off, but how or what advice would you give for really thinking about sustainability of projects and how those of us who are involved in community engagement can look to make more sustainable efforts, essentially?
Yeah, that is a persistent issue, right? In our field is this sort of episodic nature or cyclical nature of our work. And one thing that I would offer is don't be afraid to borrow from our histories, right? Community engagement professionals in higher ed have traditionally been organizers and advocates. And so if you can reorient your culture in a way so that you're creating a coalition, right, that integrates your students as assets, that integrates your full-time staff, that integrates your faculty, that positions your community partners as co-leaders in the work, right, because they're there 24/7, 365. Um, as you have those highs and lows of your team capacity, you're still able to maintain that magnetic center. You're still able to advance the work. And so if you find yourself lamenting this, like, oh, like, I really wish this could have gone beyond April or May, think about who it is you need to extend an invitation to come to the table, to be part of your coalition, and to make sure that that relationship isn't just driven by our academic routines, because we know that that's not the routine of our communities. And so that's how we've been able to be successful, is thinking proactively, right? How is it from May 1st to August 15th? Can we hold the gap and pull the right folks in and make it clear that we're not just interested in a peak time relationship? I think also if you're committing to yourself and your team, that you should be transparent about that, because you set a different standard of expectation when you're able to communicate and willing to communicate, hey, I'm going to be around here for a while. I'm going to keep coming to the table. You're not going to see me disappear in a year or two. And I know folks can't always put a guarantee on their positions and their professional role and professional power. But at least at the University of Pittsburgh, my supervisor, Lena, knows, I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So the University of Pittsburgh is going to be stuck with me for the next 20 years, right? And so I enter my relationships like that, right? I joke with our local residents in that way, and they understand and they know. Our director of community affairs is the same way, right? We feel like we're Panthers for life, and we're really proud of the culture that we've been able to build together. So I think if we have that same level of commitment from our partners, that know that we mean it, and that we're going to keep trying, that we're going to keep piloting and keep failing together, it completely sets a very different tone for what's possible and how folks are receiving how the University of Pittsburgh can be a partner of choice in different ways.
I love that. It's so good. And yeah, absolutely. I think I appreciate so many things that you said there, but I do think that that proactive approach is so important. And I love that you said about holding the line, right? And so just being transparent that, sometimes we know that there will be an ebb and a flow, but if the more we can be proactive and bring the right people to the table, we can help prevent that sort of gap or that slip that we oftentimes, do encounter. Karen, anything that you would like to add to that from the community perspective of ways that maybe whether it be something that a community organization can do, or even something that the institution can do to support those efforts for you all as we move forward?
Yeah, I love the word coalition you used, the coalition idea. But I think an example would be our work with the Center for Community Engagement. We started out working with WVU classes, I think 6 or 7 years ago. And I believe we've had students involved every semester, and it's actually grown to not just working with classes, but working with grad students in social work, grad students in public health, undergrad psychology students. And I think having those lasting relationships, as you both have mentioned, having the lasting relationships, building new relationships to have lasting relationships. And I think it can't be dependent upon any one community entity. So coalitions, advisory groups. I've been thinking about a think tank, trying to bring different stakeholders together. I think those things where we say we're in it for the long haul and we've got a group of stakeholders together so that we're working together over time is the way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the idea of a think tank. And it's so interesting, that as we have come sort of out of this COVID era or whatever our new normal is, that I keep hearing a sort of resounding echo of we need to get people at the same table. We need to be in each other's space and, interacting in that way in order to help build these opportunities and really platforms, I think, for us to continue to make really impactful community change. So I want to then sort of look into the future a little bit. I know that this is sometimes hard to do. We know that there's a lot of work that goes into place-based engagement, but there's also a ton of impact that comes out of it. And so I want us to kind of think about what the future could look like of place-based engagement opportunities, and what actionable steps, we've sort of talked about this already, but can institutions and organizations take to really advance this approach, and what you maybe think the ultimate outcome could potentially be. And I'll leave that up to the two of you if either of you feel led to speak first.
That's a big question.
It is a good question.
I would love to see a new future where we are working across systems. So I think that's the big thing is working across systems, getting the systems together, not being siloed. So creating spaces where we can have that work across systems, which I think sometimes those are few and far between, but creating those spaces would be important for the future. And I also think getting feedback, whether that's through focus groups or interviews or however that could happen from the different stakeholders is really critical too. We've just found that's been so helpful to our work, to inform our work and inform those that we're working together with too, because there are gaps in, it does take a village, like you said before. So.
Yeah, I love that stakeholder feedback.
Yeah, so for me, I'm of two minds of this. One is our future has to very necessarily involve our youth. And that's where my career started. I believe this is where we all need to be paying attention in order to drive our work forward. And so I love spending time with young people. I love thinking about what it is that motivates them, that that makes them feel seen and that makes them really commit to their best selves. And I think that is the future for us all. I don't always get the opportunity to work with our students, but I do get the opportunity to spend some time with K-12 students that are in our programs, as well as with my own mentee, who I was matched with when she was just in 7th grade. And now she's a University of Pittsburgh employee, which blows my mind. That we've just been a part of each other's lives for so long. So I know not everybody has the capacity to do this, but I feel grounded in serving as a mentor to a young woman. I had mentors in my life. I'm also the mentor to a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University. And so I think that this intergenerational work is going to be critical to the future of place-based engagement and being able to have our 2-year-olds and our 82-year-olds be able to spend time with one another and really connect with this sense of some sort of shared through line. I also think we do need to break down our silos and sectors. And so that's my big academic thinking, right? Like that is my big infrastructure thinking with my other hat on in my role. And so I've been thinking about how the University of Pittsburgh can start to think about where we have some real deep concentration of resources, of energy, of expertise, and how it is we can couple that with what we're hearing or community wealth and wisdom, right? Where is it that folks want to see us go big? So that together we can start to concentrate our efforts instead of having these parallel or siloed bright spots that really are incredible. What does that mean to start as serving as impact multipliers for one another, to start to have more intentional interdependencies on our practices and our work? And so the big part of the enabler for my work are these communities of care and connection within our institution. It's communities of care that reach outside of our institution. It's the things that I'm doing when I'm not at work that I make conversant with my work and vice versa. And so if we can all do the individual work to drop our silos across our professional and personal identities, if we can start to think about the networks that were helpful to us when we were in 2nd grade, right? I was a Girl Scout, and you don't think about that when you're in your professional role. I was volunteering at my church. I was doing all of these things. I was part of a female only high school, right? And thinking about what it means for women to have each other for support. And I pull all of these things through, right? Where we are the cumulative total of our experiences, of our people. And so I think if we can remember that place-based engagement is so strong. If everybody brings that along with them, then we really have the opportunity to do something that actually changes the lived experiences of our partners and ourselves for the better.
Yeah, That's so powerful. And I love, and I know I saw some hearts going up on the screen when you mentioned, as soon as you mentioned, talking to our young people and really activating our young people and allowing them to play not just a role, but to really help lead these efforts. And we know that so many of our youth are passion driven and they're ready to utilize their skills. And I think sometimes they just don't know how to. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of help show them the way. And I love your mention of some of the experiences that you had along the way, and how those do definitely impact us, and making sure that all of the youth that we work with have those similar experiences. I know that that's something that we're always looking at, is making sure that those experiences are open to everyone and not just, some of our youth. And Karen, I was thinking about you as well, because I know that I know a little bit about the history of Libera, and I know that initially Libera primarily worked with adult women, and then the sort of organically the decision was made to focus at a little bit younger age. And so I want to give you an opportunity to maybe speak on that and why that was important and how that relates to what Jamie also mentioned.
Yes, I love the idea of the intergenerational approach and mentoring, because that's a big part of what we do at Libera. We started out as a group impacting women because I'm a woman, and the group we got together were women, and we were talking about how can we help women find more internal freedom. But within the first year, as I was meeting with different community members, stakeholders, Girls on the Run directors, advocates at the local domestic violence shelter, they were saying, you need to be doing this with girls. And girls are impacted in deep ways during their adolescence, and you could actually help them and help them maybe have a different trajectory in life if they address some of these things younger. So we started out doing high school groups then, and I was actually thinking the material, the things we do are a little bit above the middle schoolers, but very quickly we discovered, no, the youth these days, they're very with it. And even middle school girls were able to really comprehend the principles that we had in our workbook and model. And so we've been doing middle school and high school groups ever since. And yeah, I think it's very important to hear from youth, not only through our interviews and our qualitative data, but it's very important to hear their stories. So that's a lot of what we do in Libera, is we're hearing their stories, we're listening to their stories, and the youth are the future. Yes, we want to build brighter futures for youth and young women in West Virginia so they're free to achieve their dreams. So we need to be working at an intergenerational level.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember talking, I can't even remember now if it was you or someone else from Libera. And I remember the comment was made that when you were working with adult women and talking about the barriers that they were facing, that you realized that a lot of the things that they were bringing to the table were things that happened to them when they were much younger.
Yes.
Many of those things didn't happen in adulthood. They happened in adolescence and in childhood. And
Yes.
so realizing that, as you said, we can kind of close that gap a little bit rather than waiting until they're an adult, instead of, waiting until they're adult, just
Right.
we move, right?
Yes.
And start to meet them where they're at. And so I really love that. I love the idea of listening to those stories. That's certainly a theme that we've heard throughout, whether it be with, Libera, but then also just with work of place-based engagement and community engagement in general. When we're working with communities, really taking the time to listen to people's stories, and just so important for the work that we do. Anything else that either of you feel sort of led? I have a few more questions. I'm sure our folks on our call have questions, but I also realize that we are getting to that time where we'll be wrapping up in a couple of minutes, and we never get to all of the questions that we want to ask, but I want to give an opportunity if either of you have something that's sort of laying on your heart or on your mind that you want to, use this opportunity to share with the group, I want to give you an opportunity to do that.
I mean, I just had one other thought, and it's really kind of related to creating these spaces. Is I think that the basic idea of communication is important, because honestly, the more I do this work, the more I see, oh, there's this resource we didn't know about. Oh, there's this organization we didn't know about. And that's pretty much across the board. Everyone says those things to us. So somehow if we could increase communication between community agencies, members, stakeholders.
Always good. Yes. Communication. I always say, like, it is just an ongoing effort on all of our parts, but certainly something that we know we can break down.
I think I would just share that, in the human services field, we spend a lot of time doing asset mapping and encouraging communities and families to think about their natural supports. And I think about my own life in the same way. I have to remind myself to slow down and think about all of the folks that have poured into me, the folks that I turn to when I've got a problem, the folks that cheer me on and I don't even know it. And those are the folks that help you to do your most creative work, right? You have to have, sometimes we refer to it as our kitchen cabinet, right? Our informal folks that you can just sort of tap into, to build your strength with, when you're feeling low, and to celebrate with when you've had a big win. And there are too many folks out there doing place-based work, doing community engagement work with only one or two folks by their sides. You can't do this with a small team, and you've really got to think about expansively, who and what do you bring to bear, and what do you mean, and what are you all grounded in and with. And so if you don't have, I'm actually an introvert, surprisingly. And so I spent a lot of my life relying on three people for everything, until the leaders around me told me over and over and over again, right? Like, you have to expand your team, you've got to expand your squad. And so now I have this squad of incredible, powerful women that I am in awe of, that I'm grateful to be able to tap and to check myself with every day. And I think it's made me the better for it. And so that would be my word, is like, find your people, tell them that they're your people, and listen to them when they offer counsel.
Absolutely. So important to have those people in your life. And I think definitely a resounding theme here. And I also love, Jamie, what you said. And you had mentioned it earlier and it stuck with me, and mentioned it again, but thinking about the assets, I think sometimes we naturally in this line of work where we tend to look for deficits. And so we're looking at communities and saying, well, what does this community need? Where are the deficits that we see? And while that is important, it's also important to recognize and to utilize the assets that community has as well, to overcome those barriers. They don't need that, shining savior to swoop in, but instead need someone to actually recognize and do on a community level what you just said that people have done for you on a personal level, and myself as well, is to speak those assets to life, right? And to remind you that you already have the resources at your disposal. You have the knowledge, you have the expertise. And so we're just really coming alongside to champion that and to support that and partner, but not necessarily to come in with a pre-existing solution that we think is going to work in that situation. So thank you both so much. It does look like, I'm looking here at the chat, and I do think there's a couple of questions. Let's see, and I will just probably open this up to both of you, but Amy, it looks like Amy Allen with the WVU Cancer Center said, at the Cancer Center, we are committed to communities in our state and working to address cancer health disparities. Do either of our speakers have any suggestions for us as we seek out ways to engage communities in research-oriented projects? Want to gather ideas and further involve them in the actual research process? So I will open that up to either of you.
Yeah, so I actually have a twofer answer for both Amy's and Jody's, because Jody asked about a training for community members as well. So at the University of Pittsburgh, we host what we call the Engaged Scholarship Project Development Cohort. This is a 16-hour program over the course of an academic year where we ask our faculty to bring their community partners to the table for a facilitated process of deep interrogation and co-developing a scholarly research project. And so while our faculty are the ones to apply for that program, that application just makes visible to us who your partner is and how it is they're being integrated into your thinking about research. And our office pays an honorarium for their time. That is how we serve as an enabler to reduce barriers and ensure that folks are actually able to hold the mental space as well as time for deep thinking like this. And so we go all the way from, hey, let's do some visible and explicit teaming so we can raise up the assets that are embedded within teams. We're asking folks to do a deep dive into what their logic models and their theory of actions are. And they're building that together, literally sitting at the same table. It's amazing. Then we're having this opportunity to position our researchers, our faculty, our community partners as equal co-learners. We're bringing in our folks that can help to resource this research, right? So we're talking about funding grades and the internal dollars available, the external dollars. We're talking about those deadlines. We're also talking about publishing and dissemination in ways that can feel more liberatory and accessible. So we'll talk about some of the prominent journals, but we'll also talk about ways that you can chunk that amazing research, those insights, into more community accessible ways, and how it is that folks can train themselves up to stand in front of a community audience and make a very different appeal for the work that's different than an academic audience. So if you can't hear, I'm incredibly proud of that program. It's something that launched under the leadership of Dr. Lena Dostilio, and now I'm the lead facilitator for that. And now I've got a staff member with me that's thinking about how do we create more of those opportunities, because we know not everybody can do a 16-hour program. So we're building out these various pathways for participation for a distributed leadership model, right? Because we know folks are doing this and doing this well. All we need to do is connect our internal and external communities of support and elevate what's happening. So on our website at community.pitt.edu, if you go to the scholarship section, you can see some of the ways in which we support our campus peers. But also want to name very quickly that we've got a nonprofit capacity building program that we've piloted. And that was very intentionally because, right, a lot of the tensions and pain points in partnership is because folks have this mismatch of expectations and of foundational knowledge. And so our nonprofit capacity building program is intended to do a couple of things. One, to reorient a select set of University of Pittsburgh programs towards community mission and strategic goals. Where they may have been grounded in student learning objectives before, right? We're asking people to just bear with us as they reorient themselves, as they do the homework of seeing the strategic goals of our partners and do their best to meet that bar. We're also then allowing our community partners to just get some visibility to our internal leadership, to better understand what it means to be a co-curricular partner versus a research partner versus an engagement partner, and how it is they might be able to manage that relationship without lift and having to repeat themselves over and over and over again. So it's a completely dialogic model. We didn't walk into this with a set of prescriptive goals. We just wanted to be in strong relationship and to demonstrate what it means to be relationship forward. And that has resulted in some amazing outcomes, right? We've got partners that are going to be sharing the same facility because they've been connected in this way. We've got partners that serve the same geographic area that didn't know one another, that now are actively caring for one another. And really the model is that I get on a Zoom room with 2 executive directors every month and say, hey, I'm your navigator. What's hot for you right now? How can the University of Pittsburgh be of service? And we hold each other accountable to what happens in those spaces. So I think being able to just sort of be brave and say, hey, let's try this with a set of partners and see what happens can be really, really powerful. And those are the types of things that allow us to train up ourselves, to train up our partners, and to really better understand where there's opportunity at those intersections.
Those both sound amazing.
Wow. Yeah, so much. Amy, and Jody as well. Hopefully that helped to answer some of your questions. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or unmute. Boy, that was so much, and what an excellent model of bringing folks together. I just love what you were talking about with that engaged scholarship development project and bringing people together at the same table. And I really appreciate your addressing of sometimes the mismatch between that foundational knowledge and who brings what to the table. And so having someone to help facilitate that is so critical to making those relationships really meaningful and allowing them to take off on a good foot, I think is oftentimes really important as well. Karen, anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, those both sound so amazing. I'll have to follow up with you, Jamie.
Absolutely. Any other, I do want to give just a second. I know we're kind of down to the wire here, but if anyone else has any last minute questions that are burning, do please feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute. I'll give just a second. And in the meantime, we really want to thank you, Karen and Jamie, for your time, for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and your expertise. We feel incredibly blessed to be able to learn from the two of you and to just be able to really be in your presence and hear about the incredible work that you're doing. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone. I know we have a lot of impact multipliers on this call. We'll be following up with a recording of this video and a list of resources. Jamie and Karen, thank you so much. Whitney, thank you. We'll be in touch, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thank you.